Hello and welcome to Birth of a New Dimension. My name is Aurora, and today I'm going to speak all about the use of the higher faculties, and I define this as seeing with inner vision or using pure insight. So if I were in your physical presence, I would be pointing at my forehead right now, because that's usually what I do when I associate or think about this particular aspect of consciousness or aspect of perception. Brief pause. So I would also probably pick up a little etching that I have that shows these particular patterns of energy in the torus or twin torus shape that are these energy centers on the body, and show the place at the center of the skull where these two energy centers converge. And that is the area of insight, which is, it's on the forehead or the brow of the body. And it is associated with the pineal gland, but it's not synonymous with your pineal gland, because upon death, like physical death, your body dies, you're no longer having consciousness in your body, you can dissect the brain and you can see the pineal gland, under a microscope or something like that. However, after death, you can no longer see the energy field that is the area of consciousness, that is the perceptual organ of insight. That evaporates because it's an organ of consciousness. So when there's no more consciousness, there is no more organ of perception that is based upon consciousness. So and all of these words, it's so cumbersome, but you're with me. I'm flapping my moving mouth parts here. So all of this in order to say that we have our physical eyes. These are the apertures, mostly in the front of our face, that are able to collect photons and give us information about the physical world around us. However, we also have higher vision, or a multidimensional vision, or inner vision, or insight. And this is pure understanding that is not verbalized. It is not clothed with words. So it is the type of pure understanding that we experience as a precursor to verbalized understanding. And this pure understanding is associated with the multidimensional viewpoint, or the viewpoint an individual achieves when you get a little bit of I want to say air, like when a basketball jumper gets air. When you get to jump off the surface of time. When you get a little bit of height, is I guess a good word, off of the surface of time, and you're able to see more into the future and perceive more of the past and how it relates to the present. That if you're stuck to the surface of time, it's like a little pedestrian that's, you're just walking down a footpath. You can only see a few feet in front of you, and you can only perceive a few feet behind you. And it is very challenging to know what's going to come, miles down the road. And if we contrast that with the person who's, 100 feet tall, or a person who has climbed a mountain, or a person who's on stilts, or a person who climbed a giant ladder, that person has a higher perspective, and they're able to see more down the pathway and anticipate more. That's what the terrain looks like. That's where I'm going up there. And also to make good choices based upon that. So the insight that comes with, or the ability to be able to see down the road of time, is part of insight. And so what I'm trying to say here is that insight is an activity or a perception, and it is based in an organ of perception that is like an eyeball, but it's not a physical eyeball that you can dissect after death. It's an organ of perception, which resides in the center of your forehead. And it doesn't just work on its own. Just like your heart and lungs work together in your physical body, your eye of insight works along with your crown chakra or energy center. And this is located at the very top of your head, where a little baby's fontanelle is. And there's a reason why babies have a fontanelle. When you first are born and your skull plates are not fused, there's this soft or open area of the skull that has not yet formed. And it's literally that area of the body. The physical body is reflecting the energy qualities of the non-physical body, where there is still a very strong and profound connection of that little tiny infantile consciousness to the ocean of consciousness from which we emerged or to which we are connected. And we're not supposed to be disconnected. I say this all the time. I emphasize all the time. So to long-time listeners, thank you for tuning in for the flapping of my moving mouth parts. And to new people, this is what I talk about all the time. The idea that we were not originally designed in these beautiful, wonderful physical containers. And we really do have beautiful bodies. However you feel about your appearance, your cell structure is beautiful. Your metabolism is beautiful. The fact you contain life and consciousness is beautiful. These beautiful containers were meant to be like a house for our consciousness while we lived here in the physical reality. We weren't supposed to be disconnected from that ocean of consciousness, like our mother that has given birth to us. We're not supposed to be totally disconnected from that. That's, our divine origins. Just let me close my window. Hold on a second. We were designed to come down here into these physical containers. When I say down here, into this level of density, like a lower level note. Not a less good place. Some people think lower means lower in value. It doesn't mean lower, it just means lower in tone. We came down here with the idea that we were going to be continually connected to the higher dimensional, not necessarily better, just higher in frequency, higher dimensional world that we were coming from. And it is only due to the genetic squashing, the disruptions and distortions of the human genetic code that has given us this present format that I call domesticated humanity, as opposed to, the wild, undomesticated format. And it's the difference between the wild wolf that runs around in the forest and the domesticated dog that sits peacefully at the foot of its owner's bed, waiting for commands. That humanity, before our genetic code was changed and transformed, we were wild. We took our directives, our behavioral directives and motivations directly from the divine. There were no intermediaries. No one told us what to do. No bosses, no kings, no religious leaders, nothing like that. No social structure. Each person was like a very highly individualistic jazz musician that knew exactly which notes to play in their life. And the notes that you play, quote unquote, are your thoughts and your activities and your behaviors. Wow, that's really different than this world here. This world here in this time and place, it is normal. It is taken for granted. It is de rigueur that someone else is going to control and direct your behavior. So maybe it might be your mommy or your daddy, or maybe it might be your teacher, or maybe it might be a religious leader, or it might be a government or system or something like that. There are all of these different, or a boss. The boss is the big one, because most people at a certain point, they get to be a little ornery and they're like, I don't like other people telling me what to do, but you still need money. And in order to get money, most people work for a boss. And so now, of course, there are a lot more self-directed or entrepreneurial people in the world. But up until this point, that was very like social conformity, that in order to have money, one had to work for someone else. So what I'm bringing up is that, within the past 10 years or so, technology and the connectivity of the internet has given greater freedoms for an individual to be able to be a freelancer, a person that controls and directs their own behavior throughout their day. So you can set up your own business, like whatever. If you want to be a sock designer, you can design your own socks, set up your own website, sell your stuff independently, get people to buy your stuff. You don't have to have someone else be your boss. But that's a relatively new capacity that hasn't been around for that long. It used to be if you wanted to be a sock designer, you had to go to all the big sock designing companies and knock on their door and get on your knees and say, oh, please hire me. I'll be the best sock designer you ever knew. Like being a good dog that sits at the master's bed waiting for their orders and being patted on the head and not just running around rampantly and chewing and pissing on everything. But that is the domesticated form of the human that says, well, in order to get my food, you have my bowl full of dog kibble filled up every day, or my money in my bank account, I need to do this for someone else. I have a master, I have a boss, someone that tells me what to do. So we are heading back into levels of undomesticity, on becoming undomesticated. It's like the reverse of breaking a wild horse for the saddle. It's a horse that has already been ridden for many years in the stable, and one day they throw off their saddle and their rider and they say, forget about you. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to jump over this corral and I'm going to run around in the wild and eat nothing but, wild grasses. So this is the idea of what humanity is now doing. It's saying, social structure, I throw off your constraints. I throw off your expectations. Like literally, these were the expectations that were programmed in by previous generations, behavioral expectations also through schooling and education of what it is to be, quote unquote, a good person or a good citizen or a good member of society, that people considered you to be a contributing member of society if you, quote unquote, get a job. And, like from the hippie realm in the 1960s, that is what older generation people would say is an insult to younger generation people. What are you doing? Busy protesting the war? Why didn't you get a job? Like, go work in an office every day and then you will not be on the streets protesting. Blah, blah, blah. We're not actually meant to have an external boss, because this is all about our flight through the time field. So I usually, in my webinars, I hold up this little yellow sculpture that is a 3-dimensional double torus, and it represents the time field, and that's also what our energy centers or chakras are shaped like. And this is not a constraint control mechanism, something evil that is malevolent, that is keeping you down. No more than, it's a map. It is no more malevolent or inherently constraining than is a map of difficult territory. And the map is something that we can use to guide us, but don't be like, I hate that this map exists just because the territory is not easy to get through. So what we are experiencing in terms of difficult territory, talking about the journey of consciousness through time, and yes, we're in a very constrained and oppressive time where it is very difficult to think your own thoughts. And that's what this broadcast is all about. I hope you can tell, if you're new, that my value system is based entirely in the tone of unconditional love and freedom. And freedom doesn't just mean freedom for one person in the galaxy to oppress everyone else. That's not freedom. Freedom is a totality statement. It's like infinity. Everythingness is infinity. It's not like infinity, oh, but just not this little stuff over here. So freedom means the totality is free. You can't have freedom 99% of the world and then just 1 little percent of slavery and distortion. So this is the whole point, that right now there is a lot of slavery and distortion in this context that I'm sharing with you. The context is planetary, it's social and cultural, and it is dimensional. It has to do with the level of density that we are experiencing. But it's not inherently distortive to be at this level of density or to be playing in this octave. I'm going to get to my piano over here. That can be a beautiful octave if it's perfectly tuned. But what happened was our bodies in this octave were made to go out of tune. That's the genetic squashing. So many people think, oh, I hate this music. I hate these tones. I hate having to play in this particular area of the scale of music because everything is so caca cuckoo and out of tune. And the answer is there's nothing inherently wrong with this place or these notes. There's something wrong with the tuning. We got to fix the instrument, and the instrument is our bodies, our individual bodies, how our individual bodies relate to the time field like an individual cell that is circulating through the circulatory system. And it's also our planet, because our planet, I mean, many environmentalists, doesn't take a lot to open your eyes and see our planet is suffering too. So individual bodies suffer with disease. It's not just humans. The many other mammals on land are suffering. All of the ocean creatures are suffering. Plants are suffering. Oh God, all the nanoparticles and the freaking aerosols are heavily polluting the soil and the water, and all of this is affecting plants and their ability to take up micronutrients and to actually thrive and grow. So yeah, there's been huge mass tree die-offs also. So this is all of the macroscopic life forms that we recognize on Earth, plants and animals, and it's also affecting microbes, and it's affecting the insect realm. The GMOs that humans plant are affecting the insect realm, not in a good way. I know a lot of people don't like bugs. They're like, die, bugs, die. But you don't understand that the bugs are a necessary part of the ecosystem, and like having healthy butterflies and having healthy bees. This is part of having enough food so that we can eat. So these are important things. So there's systemic disease in the individual body, there's systemic disease in the planetary body. All of this is due to the genetic squashing. All of this is due to the domestication of human consciousness. And what something like the Flying Rainbow Lasagna does is allows each individual to pop back forward into or outward into their multidimensional shape from their flattened shape, to get back into the higher dimensional format that you're supposed to be in terms of time, to be able to really see across time. So mostly if I said to, the general population, not the cool people that I usually hang out with, I said to people, hey, is it normal for people to be able to see through time and know the future? Most people would say, no, that's not normal at all, Aurora. That is something for a magical person, a person with a crystal ball who does gazing into the future, or a prognosticator, or some kind of a prophet, like a holy prophet. That's not just for a regular person, like a regular guy who's about to hop in his car and go out and get a cup of coffee or something like that. It's only for special people. And so, of course, because when I use this example in some of the webinars, a lot of the people that are signed up as class participants, they pipe in. They're like, hey, I can see the future. I can see the future. I'm like, guys, I know you guys can see the future. And that's why you're in this class, because it's a class about multidimensional perception. So and I'm not trying to make a distinction like those who are elite and those who are lowly. It's more like a sense of some people have been practicing their instrument and they know how to play all the notes and they know how to play certain songs. That's called looking into the future. And some people haven't picked up their instrument and they haven't done that practice. They don't have it yet. They have the potential to be able to have it. So yeah, through practice, everyone can improve. Everyone can gain these skills. So that's a big part of it. The sense that, oh, it's not like only certain people are born to be music virtuosos and everyone else is just a ham-handed idiot. It's really not like that. We were designed with these physical containers that are like a car with a windshield. So you can see where you're going forward down the road. It's not supposed to be that you're flying blind. So that's what I would like. If there's one takeaway from this broadcast that people will say, hey, this is an innate birthright, that being connected through the higher faculties to this type of higher dimensional vision is a divine birthright. And it's something that has been unfairly taken away from or constrained or limited or prevented from developing by overlords of humanity, the domesticators who control and the domesticated dogs, quote unquote, and pat them on the head. Don't want people to be able to see the future, because if they did, they would know, oh, that's an empowerment. That we don't want people to be empowered. We don't want people to be able to know where they're going and navigate the time field effectively. So much easier to control blinded people. And that's what these genetic diminishments have done. So there's many different forms of self-cultivation that lead to a reawakening and a cultivation of the higher faculties. Flying Rainbow Lasagne is my invention. It's my tool. It's one way to do this. It's not the only way. So I'm trying to say, for many thousands of years, all of these different schools of formalized teaching, esoteric schools have been developed. Sometimes it's about breathing exercises or specific body postures or things to eat or things not to eat or particular belief systems or particular thought structures. There's all sorts of different ways to do it. This is the whole point. It's a birthright. It's something that we all should be able to do. It's like learning how to run. No baby is born and comes out of the womb with their legs and their muscles and their toes fully formed so that they can just hop out of their mom's womb and run a marathon. The capacity to run is something that we gain and that we learn. So it's exactly like that. However, due to our genetic squashing and social structure, basically the hacked human operating system that starts to be implanted, as that hacked human operating system is downloaded and implanted, the human mind, the baby's fontanelle closes up, the divine connection diminishes until it becomes a very minimal, just enough to keep the cells of the body alive, but not really enough to feed consciousness. And the sense of ego or separation from context also develops. And as there is more and more verbalized conscious thought, there is less and less focus with the attention on pure insight. So when I talked about the breathing exercises, the postures, there's all these different schools of meditation also. And the meditation techniques and endeavors are meant to learn to control the mind, to get rid of the hacks in the software, like fix the software program so it's not constantly glitching, and to make it more possible for human beings to be in silence, like inner silence. Think about how mischievous it is to give someone a mental program called the verbalized mind and never give them an off button. I think the Buddhists call this the monkey mind. It's the chattering, verbalized mind that's always blah, 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 talking inside of you. It's like that constant static on the line is what prevents most humans from being able to effectively focus on pure insight. So the idea is to cultivate pure insight. First, you raise your energy to the level of unconditional love, and unconditional love is a tone. It's like a musical tone. Here's a... It's a note that we make with our non-physical body when we move through time at one moment per moment. So when we are not struggling, when we're not grasping forward in anxiety, sitting in this moment now wondering what's going to happen next, and then what's going to happen next, and then what am I going to do about this? That's anxiety. That's projecting into the future. And then there's depression, which is holding on to ballast from the past, like the way the sandbags prevent a hot air balloon from rising up. It's like, oh, something bad happened in third grade, you skinned your knee on the playground, and then you keep thinking about that, even though you might be like 57 years old at this point, but you're still thinking about what happened in third grade. That is also, it's the antithesis of focusing all of one's attention and the ability to perceive and think and be conscious on this moment now. That this moment now is a profound opportunity. And if you disperse your consciousness into the past and into the future, you have less access to the opportunity that is presented by focusing your consciousness like coherent laser light on what is going on right now. So bringing consciousness to the level of unconditional love is the prerequisite for then getting enough quote unquote gas in your car to be able to begin to activate the higher faculties. And the higher faculties include what's going on at the throat level, which is communication. So that's where we add symbolic, I want to say thought structure. We add these symbolic structures to the pure insight, and that is what allows us to share it with others. Symbolic, it could be auditory symbolism, like I'm using auditory symbolism right now to talk about it with my flapping, moving mouth parts. It's words, it's sounds, and it can also be hieroglyphics, a visual symbolic language. It can be music. It can be basically anything that we do. It can be art, it can be dance and gesture, anything that we do in order to communicate, and mostly it's things that we do with our hands. It's that level of the throat and anything that springs forward from your collarbones. So it can be, playing a saxophone, it can be painting a painting, it can be gesturing, it can be speaking. So that's part of your higher faculties, the ability to add symbolic structure or take away symbolic structure. Because if somebody gives you a bunch of words, the words are just the package for the concept that is actually inside of the box. And you got to get rid of the packaging in order to see what are the contents of the package, what's inside of it. And that's what we do at that energy center. So then the insight is available. It's refining a concept up to the level of non-verbalized pure insight, which is your true mind. The monkey mind, the chattering mind, the constant talking, that is the implanted mind. That's not who we really are. So that's so, just mischievous is not the word. It's so not okay to give someone a program like that, but not give them an off button. And when people begin to practice self-cultivation through different schools of meditation and mindfulness, the idea is getting an off button. That's what that all is. And I don't have any particular, I'm not associated with a particular school of meditation or give out particular techniques. I mostly say to people, find what works for you. But the goal is to have more inner silence, because that is how we get the gas in the car to go where we want to go. Or like water in the watering hose so we can water the garden. The water itself is unconditional love. And we're trying to send it through the conduits of these energy centers. So we send it through the communication center to insight. And then the final thing is we're supposed to be directed by the great composer, the great conductor, this higher, and I mean higher in frequency. That's the highest note on my piano. It's not the best note. It's just the highest note. So we're talking about consciousness or an organizational principle or an intelligence that is a higher dimensional intelligence. It is coming from a different direction. And that is what is supposed to direct what we focus our attention on in area of insight and attention. So I'm going to go even a little bit further. And I'm going to say that not only is it a divine birthright to be able to perceive the future or see through your own insight, but that it is a sacred activity, and it is a form of divine lovemaking or co-creative partnership. Just like using your organs of sexuality, that this is a special activity. It's not, something. Eating food is also a special activity, although it is treated as a mundane chore to many, many people. But I'm trying to say that ingesting energy, like bringing in new energy, whether it be through food or through getting new ideas or insight or through sexuality, that these are divine and sacred acts. And even though in this time and place, many times these acts are shown as mundane or even commodified, I'm in this broadcast trying to get across the idea that it's supposed to be something that you do because you really want to do it, not because someone is paying you to do it. And this is really different than the mindset that most people have in this time and place, because we've been so taught to be domesticated dogs who have to have a boss or a master that tells us what to do. And society even applauds. Like if someone goes online and they say, I just got a job, everyone will pat them on the back and say, congratulations, you're such a good, responsible member of society that you have a job and that you're working. And that whether or not that boss is divinely connected and telling you to do the right things. So now I want to speak about the idea that some people will sell their insight for money. And this is the caution that I want to bring to anyone, because so now this is without judgment that I'm saying this. This is the reasoning why it is not good to sell access to your inner telescope. Your eye of insight, your attention that you use to attenuate outward like an elephant's trunk, a tendril that you use to touch on things with your mind and learn about them. It's like your telescope or your microscope. I use my attention to learn about all these different things, and that's where I get my ideas from to paint and speak about on the radio. I literally was attenuating with the sun this morning, and that's where I got these ideas to flap my moving mouth parts and come here on the radio and share them with other people. So this is like not something, like I do this very intentionally, just like I eat certain food intentionally. I go to the good store, and I go to the health food store, I get the good food. I intentionally put the good food in me. So I intentionally attenuate with my mind, with my consciousness, with reputable sources of information like the sun. You can't go wrong with connecting directly to the stars or to stellar consciousness or to that divine higher dimensional organizing principle. However, there are some people that are paid by other people or commissioned to focus their attention on certain things. So here, what it's supposed to be like is that the higher dimensional crown chakra directs your attention of what to look at. And so the analogies that I use are when you refine your energy and get enough gas in your car, you activate or open your eye of insight. And that is like getting your library card. Like the first time you ever got a library card, I don't know if you had this experience, but you walk into the library and it's full of information, and you now have access to all of that information. You can literally check out and read any book and learn about anything that you want. There's thousands, maybe even millions of books or, opportunities to read and learn in a library. So then you get a bit overwhelmed. It's like, wow, where do I even start? And that's the level of perception that most people are at when they first begin to open their eye of insight, but they haven't yet connected to that guiding principle, that crown chakra, that is like the librarian of the great library of knowledge. The librarian is supposed to say, you're new here. Be sure to check out the introductory manual. And then here's the introductory section, start with all of this stuff. Or even the librarian can say this. Here's how to read an index. Here's how to find a card catalog. I don't know if that's relevant to anyone these days, but here is a search engine that you can use to find the exact data that you want. These are important things because it's like with your attention. If you're just given an uncontrolled access to attend to anything, you can be like, be sure to listen to all of these lies and distortions over here, or be sure to watch the most hellish and distorted, unpleasant experiences it's possible to watch. Like if you could rent any movie or watch any movie, and some of them are very violent and disturbing and bloody, you don't have to watch those movies. You can watch something that's a romantic comedy that's a lot nicer or funnier. So this is the whole point. And because when some people begin to open their eye of insight, what the first thing that they focus on is all of the torment. Yes, something, there are dogs that are being skinned alive in some Far Eastern dog meat ceremony. I mean, there's horrible things that are happening on Earth at all times, and there's horrible things in the past. There's genocides, there were times when people were burned alive. If you can all of a sudden have access to any information of any time, Some people start with the violence and focusing on that, but then that can give a very skewed or distorted impression of what the world is like. Like if we walked you into a library and we said, okay, first you have to read this book about, the people being burned alive, and then this book about this war, and then this book about environmental degradation, you would begin to develop a worldview that is like, wow, the world is just a pile of shit and everything is bad. And that is the danger of uncontrolled insight. So the idea is there's a great composer that when we begin, the librarian, when we begin to activate our higher faculties, tells us, hey, you need to learn about this, look over here. Hey, you need to learn about this, look over here. So that is what I allow or encourage to control my insight. Or control is like not necessarily the right word, but to encourage or supervise the usage of my insight. Because again, we're moving beyond human domestication. I don't have a boss that's just an invisible boss. Like it's not like that. It's not like the higher dimensional taskmaster says, Aurora, you must read this book. And if you don't, then you're bad and wrong. It's not like that at all. It's exactly like a really wise and loving librarian that says, hey, I suggest you look at this. I suggest you look at this. And mostly it is a partnership. This is why I say it is like lovemaking. So lovemaking is a good example, I think, better than food, because food is a sacred activity too. But lovemaking requires, the two conscious consensual partners, and then both of them are doing what is respectful and mutually gratifying and for life and towards consciousness, towards, collaboration. This is, making music together. So it would be exploitive if it were a partnership that only pleased one person. So same thing with the librarian of consciousness. It would be exploitive if that librarian was like, I'm going to control and direct the vision of all these little stupid lower people, and I'm going to tell them what to do. I'm going to condescend to them. I'm going to make them look at the world in a particular viewpoint. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. It is much more of a relationship of equality and assistance and mutual benefit, that these are the types of relationships that I cultivate for myself. However, I recognize that I am speaking through this cultural filter of a lot of people that have been traumatized or victimized, but I don't like to use that word that much, but who are the experiencers of negativity. And that when you have that experience and you project forward, you think, this is just going to happen again because the world is a pile of crap. So perhaps it's really essential for people to get a real perspective when insight starts to be available, to get the proper perspective of what's really going on. Like if you were going to look at all of the organisms that live on Earth, you need to learn about plants and animals and microbes and minerals and water and all these different things. It all mixes together. You can't get a balanced viewpoint only by learning about plants, because then you would only be getting a very selective view or, tiny fractal slice of the information. So this is truthful of everything that we apply our insight to. So now all of that backstory and setup in order to say why I feel that it is not something that's beneficial, or I'm trying not to use the word right or good, but it's not recommended to sell your insight for, as a commodity, to sell access to your inner telescope. So let's say I've got 100 units of insight that I have collected, like energy that I can send through my inner telescope in order to learn about whatever I want to learn about. I can use it to learn about deep antiquity, even a time before historical records were kept. I can use it to learn about looking into the future, looking into multiple different futures. I can use it to look into my body, the health of my body. I can say, hey, what's my pancreas doing right now? Hey, what are my cells doing? How's my metabolism doing? I can use it to look into someone else's body. I can use it to look into the solar system, or to look into a particular planet, or to look at a particular astronomical body that is flying around like a comet or something like that. So these are the type of things that we can do by focusing our attention. So let's say I have 100 units of attention that I can spend however I want. And someone else in the physical reality comes along to me, maybe they have 0 units of attention. So they're like, wow, Aurora, you've got 100 units of attention. How about I pay you $100 and you spend your units of attention looking at something that I want you to look at? as opposed to looking at what you need to find out about in order to learn and grow and develop on an inner level. That's, for your own inner growth and development of your consciousness. I want to give you $100, but I don't want you to spend your attention on what you need in order to learn. I want you to spend your attention on what I need in order to learn. And I know that in this time and place, that is considered to be like doing something, quote unquote, that's good or right. It's like having a job and having a boss, because around here, you're considered a good person. If somebody else needs a ditch dug, like dig a hole, you dig the hole for them, they give you money. But if you just go around digging holes without someone else directing you to do it and paying you, that's just considered destruction. So this is like the mindset of the cultural context that we're coming out of, where you're a good person if you do something paid for money, because then that allows you to participate in the economy. Like, this is the rationale behind it. However, I'm trying to tell you, and in this time and place, like I'm telling you without judgment, I know that people sell their sexuality and access to their sexuality for money. And I consider that to be not a desirable thing to do, because it makes all of the music of the time field go out of tune. You're supposed to be attracted to certain people and have sexual experiences with them based on consciousness and genetics and whether your notes sound good. And as soon as you commodify sexuality, you're like, well, I'm not attracted to that person, but if they pay me this much amount, then I will share my sexuality with them. Then what that means is you're playing wrong notes with a musician that's not the right musician for you, and doing it for money. So now we're starting to see how the introduction of money or commodification of these talents or skills or life force energy makes it begin to distort the time field. So this is not because I'm saying I'm applying some kind of biblical literalist values to human behavior. I'm looking at it from the energetic viewpoint, and I'm saying that this makes the music of the entire cosmos go out of tune, and that means it's affecting everyone, and that means it's not cool for if it's affecting you, then you get to have an opinion about it. If it's just, and we're all very interconnected. So I wanted to say, if it's just something that someone is doing in their own private life, that's different. And most people are like, oh, sexuality, that's just your own private life. Yeah, sexuality is something that is supposed to be private, like not something that's put on a screen. But look at what pornography is. It is literally the publication of something that is supposed to be private for money. So once that starts happening, then you recognize this is affecting you, because then you might be exposed to these wrong notes that are going on and things that you're not actually supposed to be focusing your attention on. So I'm really talking about in terms of selling access to the inner telescope. I'm talking about people who give personal readings, or will tell somebody else's future, or will read somebody else's past, or will give health readings for someone else. And this is really troubling. I mean, I'm not trying to be critical of other people, because I think that a lot of people come with a good intention. If you have a personal talent, like the capacity to do an intuitive health reading, to be able to tell someone else, hey, you got a problem with your liver, you better go get that checked out at the doctor. Like, that could be really important. But we're getting to the question of how do you do it ethically and get paid for what you do without basically selling out or commodifying or doing the things that you're not supposed to do. So here are the challenges. In my own experience, when my own insight started to awaken, sometimes I would randomly perceive something about someone, and I would be like, I can tell, like, that guy's got toe fungus, or, you can just, you get these seemingly random pieces of information. But if I randomly perceive something about someone and their toe fungus, is it ethical? Is it right? Am I supposed to go up to them and say, hey, I know you got this problem and here's what you should do? Or even, hey, I know you've got this problem, and because in some way that is going against a boundary, that person's toe fungus is their own private issue. So why am I focusing my attention on them? So what I started to do was to ask the great librarian, hey, please give me the information and insight that I need in order to run my own life effectively, and the information that is relevant to the moment. Like, I don't need to know something about what's going to happen in 10 years. If my GPS, guiding my car, my little MapQuest or whatever it is, my little virtual guidance system, I want it to tell me whether I should turn right or turn left right now. I don't want it to tell me what I need to do 10 miles down the road or 100 miles down the road. I need my little, map guidance system on my car to tell me in 10 feet, turn right. And then in 500 yards, turn left, or, stay to the left in the fork in the road. And it's not very helpful if I get information right now about what's going to happen in 10 years. Or if I get it, because you know something, guess what? The dice of the future get rearranged. The future events get rearranged all the time. So if you have some kind of a reading, this is also why readings are I'm highly skeptical of someone else. You pay someone else money for them to tell you your future. Because also that you're blind. You're supposed to be looking down your own time road so you don't have to pay someone else money so that you know where you're going. But if I look down the time road at 10 a.m. and I say, hey, what's going to happen in 10 years? Then I'm like, okay, this is going to happen in 10 years. Then I could do the same exact thing at 11 a.m. and I could get a different reading and have a different perspective because different things have happened. New variables have been introduced. We've moved through time for a whole hour. That means new events have happened, new thoughts have happened, new people have been born. The future is constantly being changed and shifted and rearranged. There could be a solar flare, there could be a change, and any kind of thing like that. So if you're going to pay me $100, I'm going to tell you your future. You're going to have a ham sandwich for lunch, but then maybe you have a different lunch and you come to me like, Aurora, I thought you said I was going to eat a ham sandwich. I'm like, I did say that to you. And when I saw that in your future, that was your future. But then your future changed and you had a different experience. So basically, you're paying for information that is totally malleable, that is it's mutable. It gets changed and it doesn't stay in one place. It's not something that's set in stone. So that's actually a good thing about the future. If anybody comes along and gives you some kind of a negative prediction, like you'll smash your car into a brick wall, or you will drive off the edge of a cliff, or you will have parasites eat your brain, be like, that might have been the truth at that moment, but now I'm writing a different future and I'm going to choose the non-brain parasite future instead of the one that they predicted for me. So that, it can be used in a positive way. But what I'm really trying to say is that each one of us is supposed to use these higher faculties to guide our own journey. And I feel that it is a distortion and a misapplication and even a bit unethical to commodify these talents. And even though I know we live in a cultural context where you got to make money, you got to make the electrons flow through a wire, so you pay the electric company to do that. So hey, I face similar challenges. I'm an artist, and I'm a visionary artist. That means it's not like just being a graphic designer where someone comes along and says, hey, draw this picture of a roast beef so we could put it in the Sunday flyer. I want to, sell roast beef to people, because that's one level of artistry. Or how about this? I need some spoons and some cups and some forks, like make them for me so that I can have nice dishware. That's a different level of artistry. And I respect both of those things. Or even if someone commissions a song from you, if they're like, I need this song for my wedding, write me a song. And then we can play it while I walk down the aisle. All of that is ethical. All that's totally fine. I'm not saying that you shouldn't share your talents and skills for money. Nothing like that at all. However, with my artwork that I make, I paint from my inner vision. So if I have 100 units of energy to use on with my inner telescope, I use it to look at the things that I'm going to be painting. And I don't want to sell it to someone else. If someone else paid me like, I'll pay you $100 and you can look at my future, I'd be like, no, sorry, I got to spend my energy on looking at my artwork. And then if someone else comes along and they're like, Aurora, I don't want you to paint what you usually paint. Like, I will commission you or pay you to paint like I usually, if you don't know me, I paint all rainbow paintings. They're like, Aurora, I will commission you to make some artwork, but I only want you to use the color black. And like, you're not allowed to use any rainbow colors at all. I would be like, look, that's far afield from my usual work. I'm not usually monochromatic. I would say maybe you should commission a different artist in order to do that project for you. Because that's so, I want to say diametrically opposed. It's really a distortion, very far afield from the whole foundation of what I do with my work. So that is a big part of it. Or so like if someone, whatever your work is, if you're a classical musician and they're like, okay, you're great. I want to hire you, but I don't want you to play classical music. I only want you to play Jimi Hendrix. So you're going to have to learn a completely new song catalog and get some new instruments and work in a different way. It's like, thank you for the opportunity, but I'm on this path. I'm on this trajectory and this is what I've chosen. And so for someone else to come along and take you off your path just for money is a distortion. That's what I'm trying to say. Even though you might get social approval because, hey, if you get a commission, then you're getting paid and then you can buy more paints. And some people think of it like that way. They're like, I know that you're sacrificing your integrity, but then you can have money and then you can buy more art supplies and do the paintings that you really want to do. And this is the justification for it. But what it means is let's say that there's the map of your life and you're supposed to be going down, Route A, and you're driving down Route A and someone says, I want to commission you to do this work over here. I know it's diametrically opposed to what you usually do in your aesthetic and your talents and what you usually apply them to, but do it over here. So then you're like, okay. So you hop off of Route A and you drive on a completely different road and go 50 miles in a different direction. And then you get paid and it's like, awesome. Now you're 50 miles away from where you're actually supposed to be because you drove onto a different timeline. You have more money on that timeline, but behaviorally and in terms of time, you can't get back that time and you can't rewind and go back to where you were, where you drove off of Route A. So now you need to find a different path, a different life trajectory. Someone else and their money and their incentive has drawn you off of your path and has drawn you astray. So the idea is each one of us really has a divine or necessary or righteous or best life path. So for some people, it could be being an awesome baseball player. I always think of art and music because that's my gig. That's what I love to do. But for some people, it could be athleticism or healing. And I want to clarify, it's very righteous and good to use medical intuitive insights to be able to help people. Like that's why you have those insights. And it has to be done in the right way. Like you should get paid for your insights, but also if you set yourself up as a medical intuitive and then, you say, I pay whatever, you pay me $60 and I tell you what your ailments are, then that means that all of these, that's your job, that's your gig. You're going to be spending all of your inner telescope money, time, and attention on looking at people's ailments. And think about what that does. That's like reading all of the violent novels in the, fiction section of the library and not reading any of the beautiful romantic stories or the comedies. You're just looking at people that are diseased. Are you being paid similarly to look at the incredibly healthy and well-formed bodies of perfect Olympic athletes? No. So then that's a real question about a medical intuitive as to what type of a program of teaching, like what type of education is what I'm trying to say. What type of education about the world would you get if you only ever met stage 4 cancer patients and looked at their bodies and never got a chance to look at other more healthy functional bodies? So this is the challenge, and this is what I think each person should recognize I'm not judging or pointing fingers. I'm saying this is what each practitioner needs to begin to recognize about the use of their own talents. So here's how I handle commissions in my artwork. Sometimes someone will come along and they'll say, I love this piece, but I'd like a smaller version of, I'd paint really large, unwieldy panels. They're like, I love this. I don't have room for it in my house. So sometimes I'll say, hey, you know something? I can make this little 12-foot miniature section of this, and then it's smaller, and it's also more affordable because, larger paintings cost more. So I'll do something like that. Or sometimes someone says, I would love for you to paint a painting like this for me, but just a slightly different color of purple. They don't want me to take the purple out of the painting, but there's all sorts of different, there's like deep, dark Merlot or very light, pale violet, very pastel. So I might take a request like that. Or someone might say, some of my paintings are more orange and red. Some of my paintings are more purple and blue. If they wanted me to paint a particular painting for them, then they might say, hey, please do one of these designs that's mostly blue and purple because those are my favorite colors. But when I do commissions, none of these people say to me, oh, be certain to only use 7-inch circles because technically I don't use 7-inch circles that much and I'd have to recalibrate all of my paintings for that. So it's all about when a person commissions a project from you, how much of your own inner directive would you change or sacrifice in order to please them? So all of the customers that approach me about doing a commission, they already like and appreciate my work. No one comes up to me and they're like, Aurora, I want you to take out all the colors and only paint in black and white. Or no one comes up to me and they say, I want you to paint a bowl of fruit. And no one says, or, I want you to paint a pet portrait. those are lovely things. Those are just not my work. So if someone requested that, I would be like, hey, that's far afield from what I usually do, but there's lots of artists that already do that. And that's the whole point, that we're each supposed to be a unique musician that is really playing their own inner self-directed notes, in conjunction, in partnership with the rest of the cosmos. And that if it ain't the right gig for you, it is the right gig and a very comfortable fit for someone else. So if someone wanted me to paint a painting that's all black, I'd be like, not my gig, but that guy over there is way into it. Go hire him instead. And this is also like why I'm not about the competitive thing, because a lot of artists feel it's competitive. Like, oh, you're going to pay money to do it. I'll drop everything. I'll change who I am. Like, I'll do anything to please you. That's like being a domesticated dog. That's like, I'll change my behavior to please you. Like, my tongue is hanging out. I'm panting and making a nice face. I'll do anything for you. And that's not what we're supposed to be like. And so I know this is a challenge too, because even if you're not like, for creative people, they tend to be a little bit more ornery and self-directed. But some people are not necessarily creative in the sense of art or music or singing or dancing or anything that's, like that. However, everybody has their own inner preferences about what they would like to do, how they would like to structure their day, how they do their day. Whatever task that you're doing, there's a comfortable, fun way to do it, or a horrible, toiling, drudgery way of doing it. If you have to do something like put up a fence and you have to dig 17 fence post holes. I mean, you can do it in the most horrible way, which is, like do it in the middle of the day when it's boilingly hot out and you have to do them all at once. Or you could do it in a much more nice way where you get up every morning and before it gets too hot out, you dig one hole. And maybe it takes you 17 days, but you eventually finish the fence and you didn't have to, bust yourself doing it in the middle of the day when it's really hot. These are the differences in the whole approach. So I think that there are a lot of people who would be a lot more happy with this self-directed approach. And part of it is about having a healthy sense of ego. That ego can be a protective shield from inappropriate expectations of society. That society might say, hey, it's appropriate for you to be a coal miner. I want you to go into a dark hole in the ground and inhale lots of poisonous particles and breathe in a lot of bad gases and toxify your body and hardly ever get to see the sun. And you'll get paid for this. And, get the coal, bring it out of the mine, and I will give you money for this. And that you get to do that until you get really sick and die. And society will say, that's a good thing to do. Because, hey, you're feeding your family. You're doing a good thing. But it's like, but wait, society, when you do that, you're also harming your lungs and getting very sick. And then you're not there to actually take care of your family and take care of your children in your old age. But society doesn't care about that. Society says you are a good person if you sacrifice or destroy your body so that you have enough short-term money to pay your car insurance and your bills and food at the grocery store. So our society has very skewed, very inverted values about what a worker is and what a worker is valued. And I mean, this is all like stupid industrial capitalist stuff, that workers are looked at like a commodity. You're looked at like, you as a worker in terms of society are looked at like a disposable Kleenex. It's like, how many workers can we train for this job? And if they only work at the job for 1 year before their joints are destroyed and they can't do this work anymore, then who cares? They lose their job and you get a new worker. And then the new worker destroys their shoulder joints or their back joints or whatever. And then they go out and they can't work anymore. And then you get a new worker. Like, I'm trying to say that the market, the commodified market of labor, it's just like, it doesn't care about you as an individual. And I had to learn about this. Oh, if you're new to my broadcast, this is almost the end of my show, and I'm introducing myself that I'm a walk-in. So accurately, I'm a galactic abstraction in a human form, and I came into this body in 2001 after the previous ego structure died and was destroyed. And so I have a bit of an outsider's perspective on the human workforce and the experience of being here. And it became very evident to me in my first couple of formal jobs that I had. I was working at some little art supply stores and I was learning about the social structure here. And I started to understand like, oh, the bosses and the people that own these companies, they want the workers to do things that are dangerous or toxic and that you don't get paid more for doing it and they don't care about you. So 2 examples, at the art supply store, they wanted the employees to shrink wrap certain merchandise that was returned, like so that they could sell it again. And you use this apparatus that makes the smell of burning plastic. And when I did that, I'm like, wow, that smells really bad. And it's going up my nose and that doesn't feel that good. And then I later learned, I'm like, oh yeah, that's terrible to breathe in. That's terrible, toxic, carcinogenic stuff. You don't want to have to do that. And I'm like, but wait a minute. They make their employees do that. That's not a good thing. Or there was also a part of the job where I worked in gluing posters to like poster board. There's this big giant glue press, and not only is the adhesive really bad to smell, but it's like a big giant, kind of like a sandwich, like a panini maker, but just giant. And you have to reach in there and put the film down and put the poster down. And there was just this little tiny wooden stick that was propping everything open. And it's like, okay, like you hope that the little wooden stick doesn't break and the panini maker come down on your head or on your arms while you're making this giant adhesive poster panini. And I started to realize like, wow, and people that own this company just want to make money by selling posters, and they don't really care if their employees get squashed by hot poster presses. And that, so, it's like you have to be careful and protect yourself and like try to avoid doing that task as much as possible because they really don't care. They really don't care. So that was my beginning of my education. And then, of course, I learned more about social structure, and I learned more about work, and I learned more about the way that this world is structured, that it's definitely not something that one wishes to participate in. So healthy ego says, what? You want me to stick my arms into this hot panini press that's only held up by a little tiny piece of wood that could fall at any minute? No, I'm not going to do that. That's called healthy ego. Healthy ego is like, wait, you want me to crawl down into this hole and dig a bunch of coal and get miner's black lung and then die, when I'm 47 as opposed to living to age 87? No, I'm not going to do that. And these are the challenges, because this is like if you're a draft horse on a farm and you get hooked up to a big heavy wagon, and your farmer then says, okay, pull my heavy wagon. And you're a horse. You're like, I ain't going to pull your wagon. I ain't going to do this. And then the farmer is like, hey, that's not cool, because that's why I keep you around. So this is the whole point, that humanity's overlords keep humans around to be the draft horses, to be the coal miners, to be the disposable human Kleenex that is known as the workforce. And so it's up to each one of us to say, hey, I'm not a disposable human Kleenex. I'm actually a valuable individual, and I have my own sets of talents and unique abilities, and some of them never even got a chance to be explored and cultivated because of the implanted human operating system and because of human social structure, the whole educational structure. So there's a lot in terms of each individual regaining their own higher faculties through meditation, and also throwing off the shackles or getting off the yoke, the mental yoke of what is implanted in terms of the education system, especially in the United States. The education system, like the public school, it's not about teaching you intellectualism or how to think or even basic life skills. It's about making you a good factory worker or making you a good cubicle worker. It's just about conformity and homogeneity and preparing you for the workforce, which in great extent means like getting used to sitting in a desk for many hours a day and not fidgeting around and not complaining because you have to sit down all the time. Like that's one of the main things you learn in school. So all of this, I'm trying to get across the idea that using your insight is a divine act of creation, and that you shouldn't commodify it or sell it to someone else, and that you should use it with integrity, doing the things that you know you need to do and looking at the things you need to learn about for your particular growth. Thank you for being with me on this journey.